トビデオ
There was a big shift in the way people consumed anime in the mid-90s. Originally, you had 3 avenues to watch your animated products if you were a dedicated otaku: movies, TV shows, and direct-to-video OVAs. Originally, there was a clear divide between the 3. Movies were for your expensive, ambitious projects that had a lot of money invested in them. TV shows, on the opposite end, were more economical and merchandise-driven productions mostly devoted to sell products to children or to air the adaptation of whatever the big shonen or shoujo manga was at that time period. And then you had the OVAs, the flexible middle ground where studios could adapt both franchises and original pitches while still having a level of freedom afforded to them thanks to them no longer being beholden to censorious regulations. And in some special cases, you could even receive the time and budget that's usually reserved for an anime film. This all began to change come around 1995. The rise of the late night TV anime meant that production started to shift that way. Sure, the budgets were a lot tighter and there was still censorship, but the success of shows like Neon Genesis Evangelion meant that TV had become a viable avenue for a larger pool of material compared to the past. All of a sudden, studios began pushing more and more productions to TV. The guaranteed higher rate of return and getting more people to buy 12-episode anime on multiple VHSs compared to the singular 45-minute one spelled trouble for the direct-to-video format, which had already taken a battering from the 90s recession. The OVA format, of course, didn't disappear overnight. Plenty of quality direct-to-video anime were greenlit and produced well into the aughts. But compared to its golden age from the 80s to the early 90s, a decline was underway. Fewer original OVA titles were being produced, and those that did get produced were now being dropped into a much more unfriendly market. Suddenly, it was not unheard of for an OVA that began with bigger plans in mind to come out and sputter out. Probably one of the first of these was a title that began with such hope and ended up being only remembered as a punchline, if it was even remembered at all. I can only be talking about 1997's Ayane's High Kick. Meet Ayane Mitsui. She is a 17-year-old hardy athletic girl who has dreams of becoming a professional wrestler, joining the All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling stable, and wrestling with the greats like her longtime idol Manami Toyota. And that's Manami Toyota as in the Manami Toyota. Alas, Ayane's enthusiasm does not match up with her ring skills. She keeps failing her auditions, and what's worse, her mother is starting to get on her case about why she's skipping school to attend these qualifiers.
女子プロレスラーになるなんてアホなこと言ってるのはあやねだけなんだから。
It seems like Ayane might not get to experience her dream after all, but a ray of hope appears in the form of a mysterious tough-as-nails coach named Kunimitsu. He sees potential in the kid and takes it upon himself to train her until she is the best in the ring. There is only one teeny tiny itsy-bitsy little issue here. Kunimitsu isn't a wrestling coach. He is a kickboxing coach.
ねえおじさん、これって本当にプロレスの試合なの？なんだかキックボクシングみたいだけど。
俺は一言もプロレスだなんて言ってないぞ。
Because he sees her potential in leg work and high kicks, Natch, Kunimitsu has tricked Ayane into becoming a kickboxer. But Ayane doesn't want to be a kickboxer, and boy has she really stepped in it. Will an unwilling Ayane be able to unlock her kickboxing potential, or will her entire rookie career be just one big kick in the pants? On the outside, Ayane's High Kick appears to be just one of dozens or so sports anime, just a cute girl's romp into the mysterious world of kickboxing. But to me, it represents the beginning of the end of the OVA era. Fellow anime critic Bennett the Sage has expressed similar thought in his video on the subject, and I am inclined to agree. In a time where most of the anime viewing fandom was shifting more to TV over direct-to-video, Ayane's High Kick was one of the victims of said shift, standing tall as an example of how certain anime were no longer suited to the OVA world. Why exactly? Well, kick back in the red corner because we're about to talk about an anime that got knocked out in the second round. Quite literally. Ayane's high kick began as the brainchild of Takehiro Okao. Starting out as an uncredited animator for Tokyo Movie Shinsha, Okao eventually became a freelance storyboarder and director who took a variety of odd production jobs. These could range from directing the final episode of the edgy 90s reboot of 8-Man, 8-Man After, storyboarding and directing episodes of OLM's magical girl show Wedding Peach, and directing the first episode of the incredibly seedy Gorian fantasy Fencer of Minerva. From his resume, he was a true journeyman in the industry, never staying around in one place for very long, and certainly not long enough to actually helm a project full scale. We could infer that in order for him to actually do that, he would have to take matters into his own hands. So he formed his own animation studio, Rikuentai Company. He specifically named the studio after famed anti-shogunate samurai Nakakoka Shintaro's Rikuentai militia, reinterpreting the word's meaning as a company that aims to create high-quality works in society all the lands. Now, just a reminder, Okao birthed the studio into existence specifically for the purpose of creating Ayane's high kick, so it most assuredly had a lot riding on its first project. But it did help that one of the producers of Ayane's high kick were Nikatsu Corporation, one of the oldest active film studios Japan had. Just ignore that it was still reeling from a massive box office bomb 3 years ago and was currently in the process of being taken over by Namco CEO Masaya Nakamura. Okao's status as an anime journeyman also colored his choices for selecting staff for his new studio, who were all fellow anime journeymen. Chief storyboarder would be Tsuneo Tominaga. He got his start at Magic Bus studying under the tutelage of Satoshi Tazaki before striking out on his own. He would go on to direct and board a variety of projects from the mid-90s onwards, such as a few episodes of the 90s remake of Speed Racer and Cinderella Boy, an adaptation of a Monkey Punch manga that asked the question, what if Lupin could also turn into Fujiko? Screenplay would be authored by Shizutani Isao. He had been a regular in Pierrot's writing department in the 80s before going freelance in the 90s. And animation director and character designer would be Kazuo Takigawa. He had gotten his start doing key animation work for various Toei projects, and just like Okao, he had animation direction credits but only for specific episodes, not entire projects. This was also going to be his first credit as a character designer, so you could tell that this was a project helmed by a bunch of journeymen who had been in the industry for some time, but were most likely hoping that Ayane's high kick would lead them to the next step in their careers. So how did that turn out? Well, when talking about an anime like this, I feel that it's important to speak of the positives first. For one thing, I do think the majority of the kickboxing fights are well choreographed. They'd have to be. Is that not why we are here? And while they might rely on the still frames and speed frames a little too much for comfort, when they actually show the two fighters swinging and trading blows, you can still feel their athleticism with the speed of their swings and the weight of their blows. And for his first outing, Takigawa's character designs are pretty good. They come from the 90s school of anime character designs pioneered by the likes of Goto or Shimamura, characters defined by geometric shapes and exaggerated features to make them stand out. This style fits characters like Ayane and her kickboxing rival Sakuraku, Ayane being the scrappy underdog symbolized by her fiery red hair that's styled slightly rougher, and Sakuraku being the typical older, more graceful blonde-haired rival who stands out with a massive ponytail and bangs that almost serve as a domino mask. She is set up as a more villainous rival that Ayane, despite her protests, can't help but be compelled to beat.
あら、もう疲れてしまわれたの？
Opening and closing themes are also pretty strong, both being rocking sports anime anthems with a little dash of cuteness that fits the anime's lighthearted tone. The ending in particular has excellent guitar work thanks to it being done by former ex-Japan guitarist Hide, his first and sadly only foray into the world of anime theme music thanks to his untimely passing next year. Alas, that's the most I can give this anime. There are so many problems with Ayane's high kick. There's little problems, of course, like how the animation outside of the fight animation is TV level and really does nothing to justify its home video release, and the character designs outside the main fighter girls are just bland. Kunimitsu and Ayane's friend KYOTO are just reused gunbuster designs with any recognizable features sandblasted off of them. But the technical complaints are minor scuffs and bruises compared to the insalvageable damages stemming from Ayane's foundation. That's right, Skylar, there's rot. The premise of Ayane's high kick is one that should have been either sent back to the drawing board for retooling or just done away with altogether, because most of this anime's issues all stem from its premise being completely weak and flimsy. The idea of Ayane's high kick is that our title character clearly has potential to be a great kickboxer, has the body of a great kickboxer, and those two traits combine into a devastating finishing move unique to her, the eponymous high kick. But the thing is that Ayane does not want to be a kickboxer. She wants to be a professional wrestler. And that's not a bad place for a character in a sports anime to start. Most protagonists in sports anime either start out not knowing or are reluctant to dive into the sport they have the most potential towards. But soon enough, somebody, whether they be a fellow teammate or rival, helps them unlock the passion for said sports and drive them to fully realize their potential. That moment never happens to Ayane. It seems to me that the hook for Ayane's high kick is that it's a sports anime where the protagonist couldn't give less of a shit about the sport being played. Which is certainly a unique premise.
よくやったぞ。
触るなこのクソじじい、私はプロレスラーになるんだ。
Ayane's passion is professional wrestling at the start of the anime, and it is still her passion at the end of the anime. Kickboxing is just something she was slotted into against her will. Some of these story problems do have to be shouldered by the coach. A large chunk of the first episode is him training Ayane in kickboxing, but not letting on that she is training for kickboxing right up until the first bell.
やっぱかよちゃんの言う通り騙されたんだわ。
詐欺も何もここに来るまで散々いろんなチェックをしただろうが。
So what exactly is the benefit of Coach Kunimitsu tricking Ayane into being a kickboxer against her will? Okay, I get that it's most likely so she won't tell him to piss off and leave him high and dry, but what favors is he doing Ayane by doing the old lying by omission trick and only telling her the truth once the opponent's fists are bearing down on her? There's sink and swim mentorship, and then there's Heihachi dropping his son into the volcano and hoping for the best. Predictably, this leads to Ayane spending most of her debut match running around in fear and getting a foul when she tries doing her wrestling moves on her opponents. It's only by the grace of the kickboxing gods that she does discover her penchant for high kicks and wins her match. Does this experience, which could have gotten her injured or worse, unlock her passion for the martial arts? What do you think? So of course, the second episode starts out with Ayane reaffirming her goal to become a pro wrestler, declaring her hatred for kickboxing, and is trying to weasel out of Kunimitsu's training session since he's already signed her up for another match.
それよりもお前練習はどうした？
やるわけないでしょ。だって私キックやめたんだから。
何寝ぼけたこと言ってるんだ。寝言言う暇があったらさっさと練習しろ。
寝言じゃないわよ。
This all begs the age-old question of, if our main character doesn't care, then why the hell should we? What can make a good sports anime a great sports anime is it taking the time to make you care about the sport in question, either by explaining the ins and outs to you or just by making it look exciting as possible. Ayane's high kick does make some of the fighting look exciting, but the effect feels blunted by Ayane's own ambivalence towards the sports. Plus, the anime doesn't do that good a job explaining what the rule set of kickboxing is. I could only assume that they are operating under international rules because Ayane gets an extended clinch in her fight against Sakuraku and the ref doesn't blow the whistle. Speaking of Sakuraku, it's really galling that her presence feels wasted because she is really set up as the perfect rival to Ayane. The scrappy underdog versus the perfectionist professional, one training under a high overpass while the other training in a high-tech gym of her own design. I mean, the Rocky comparison is apt. Not only is Ayane the reluctant small fry, but her strategy in the ring is to mostly block Sakuraku's blows with her face. But Rocky was still able to accept that he needed to get in the ring and go the distance through the encouragement of others and his own soul searching. Ayane, on the other hand, still has to be forced to get in the ring, and the way the anime has to do this is quite contrived. So a subplot introduced at the very end of the first episode is that the principal and vice principal just so happen to get tickets to Ayane's first kickboxing show and witness Ayane's first match. For some reason, this inspires the vice principal to go on a crusade to get Ayane expelled for the crime of kickboxing for some reason.
ついに証拠をつかんだぞ三井綾音これでお前は退学処分だ
This plot point is stupid for a multitude of reasons. For one, the vice principal is treating Ayane like she is a delinquent who has had this expulsion a long time coming, when Ayane's only crime is cutting class 1 or 2 times. Plus, Ayane and the vice principal have absolutely zero face-to-face interaction with each other in the previous episode, so the vice principal's vendetta against Ayane comes out of nowhere and gives this whole affair an unintentional Kafka-esque bent to it. But of course, the principal, being the more reasonable authority figure and a fan of kickboxing, steps in and resolves the conflict by saying that if Ayane wins her next match, she gets to stay at school. Why, if I didn't know any better, I would say that this subplot that comes out of nowhere is just a way to get Ayane back in the ring whether she wanted to or not. Oh, and to artificially raise the stakes even further, KYOTO is in Ayane's corner, literally cheering her on because of a promise they made as kids to graduate together.
あやね、絶対勝ってね。それで一緒に卒業しよう。ね、お願いあやね。かよちゃん。
You better start liking kickboxing, Ayane. Your friends' high school memories depend on it. The story tying itself in knots trying to get Ayane back in the ring while she still has zero passion for kickboxing is enough to make you ask the question of, what exactly is this anime trying to do? Is it trying to parody sports anime? No, aside from some light gags, there's really nothing exaggerated about the tropes on display. Is it a deconstruction of sports anime? Well, aside from Ayane's displeasure at the sports, everything else about the anime seems to be played rigidly straight. It's not like a better story that deconstructs the sports anime narrative through women's martial arts like Teppu. And even then, the protagonist in that has a personal reason to get engaged with the sport. They are entirely petty reasons and are more motivated by spite than she is about unlocking her potential, but they are still reasons. It's only up until the very end where it seems like Ayane is about to turn a corner. She is able to beat Sakuraku, but only thanks to a technicality. This motivates Sakuraku to rematch Ayane for besmirching her perfect record, while Ayane leaves the ring muttering under her breath about how she didn't really beat Sakuraku fair and square. So finally, it looks like Ayane's character is turning a corner and she'll realize her potential does in fact lie in kickboxing, right? No! That is the end of the second episode and the end of Ayane's high kick. Just a total and complete non-ending. Nothing has been resolved and nobody has grown. And there's a reason for that. Okao had originally planned Ayane's high kick to be a 4-episode anime. Presumably, Ayane could have either kept up with her disdain for kickboxing or actually did find her groove in the sport. I guess the world will never know because after 2 releases, Ayane's high kick was discontinued for what can only be described as various circumstances. There was an attempt to continue the story in manga form through mangaka Yuji Ihara publishing it in Monthly Comic Nora. However, that too was cut short when Nora got shut down in early 1998 and Ihara had to release the rest of the manga in doujin form to complete a volume. To this day, it remains incomplete. We probably will never get the exact reason why Ayane's high kick got cut short, but if I had to gauge it, it would most likely be a complete lack of interest. By 1997, you could not just put out any old thing as an OVA and expect results. You either needed a strong hook that validates his more expensive home release, or liberal not safe for broadcast fan service. Having your hook be a sports anime where the protagonist would rather be playing another sport, well, sports entertainment in her case, is not strong enough to get people in. Maybe Ayane's high kick would have worked as a 12-episode series, but the premise is pretty thin to begin with. 4 episodes seems like it was the ideal length for Okao and company to work with, but thanks to outside forces, Ayane's journey ends right before it really even began. The price of spending too much time with playing around with cliches that could have worked better if they had just stuck with the cliches. What was this anime worth forming a whole studio for? After the failure of Ayane, Rikuentai Company just became another contractor studio to keep the lights on. They did produce other OVAs, all of which were directed by Okao, but they were all promotional material meant to market visual novels like Summer Hourglass and Underbar Summer. Their last credits of note were doing production cooperations on a few episodes of Black Butler. After that, they limped on for a few years before finally declaring bankruptcy on June 6, 2012. Unlike its protagonist, I don't see Ayane's high kick of having wasted potential. Even if everything went right for it, it would still just be a pretty okay sports anime. Instead, it now stands as a warning in how there are moments in the industry where the winds of change can come fast and strong, and it leaves casualties in its wake. Ayane's high kick thought it could have been a contender, and instead, it was left kissing the mats.